everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to Mystical Munchies featuring the Unofficial Harry Potter Cookbook. The appetizer last week was the Irish soda bread, and that turned out to be pretty good. This week we've got another bready recipe on the docket as we're making hot rolls this week. First up, let's tell the story and go through the notes. Coffee and hot rolls for breakfast. Yum. Unfortunately, it's going to be the last meal Creature serves our favorite trio. After they escape the Ministry of Magic, they end up wandering from forest to forest, hungry and wishing for one of Creature's wonderful meals. See Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Chapter 7. And then the note. Rolls became popular for breakfast because they rise and bake more quickly than whole loaves of bread, but you would still have to get up pretty early to make these for breakfast, which we're not. If you like your sleep, prepare the rolls the day before and let them rise in the refrigerator overnight. Then all you have to do is pop them in the oven. Otherwise, you're going to be very tired. And we are going to be using these as a side dish with dinner tonight. With that said, the ingredients are waiting for us over at the table, so let's move over in that direction. You can probably hear the oven chirping in the background. I do have it preheated to 350 since I'm making the chicken as usual, but we're not going to be going to the oven yet. In order to make this recipe, we need a quarter cup of warm water, a tablespoon of active dry yeast, a tablespoon of granulated sugar, half a cup, 4 tablespoons of butter. I'm using the salted butter, the other half of the stick that I used for the salted butter last week, half a cup of whole milk, a large egg and another egg yolk, 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, another 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, and a teaspoon of salt. With that, let's move into the kitchen and start putting this recipe together. We're going to start off with a small mixing bowl that we're going to get the water out for. I'm going to bring the bowl over to the sink, not the other way around. I'm just checking the temperature on the water. There's my quarter cup of water. Then we want the tablespoon of yeast and sugar. So here's the yeast. And the tablespoon of sugar. And I don't think I need the tablespoon again. No, I don't. The yeast can go into the fridge since I'm done with that. The sugar can go back to the table because I will need that again. Then we're going to combine this in here. Trying to scrape in as much of the... I'm going to grab my small scraper out here. I'm trying to stir this in so I get as much of the yeast in as I can. I was going to say, trying to feel around in there for my scraper when I know I've got knives in there. Probably not the smartest thing to do, but managed to make it work here. Alright, I'm going to combine that and I'm going to set it aside. I was hoping the yeast would dissolve a little bit better in here. I'm gonna grab some paper towels so I can wipe some of these spots of water up. Okay. Actually, it seems like it's dissolving pretty well. So we're going to set that aside until it gets puffy, and then we'll come back. We'll come back when that starts getting puffy. We'll actually be over at the stove when we come back. As I promised, we're over at the saucepan, where I've got a medium, what do they call for? A small saucepan. So now we're going to put the butter and the milk in there until the butter melts. So I've got my butter right here. And it's had a little bit of time to soften, so hopefully that'll help it out. And I've got the whole milk right here. We need half a cup of that. Easy does it on the pour. The whole milk can go back in the fridge, and of course it doesn't give me a heat threshold, so I'm just going to put that on 5 because I don't want it, I don't think I want it to boil. Okay, just making sure something for dinner tonight is still good. So we do want to have this on here until the butter melts. Whoop. To make sure I hit the right burner. I'm pretty sure I hit the right burner. Okay, yeah, it's starting to warm up, so I do have the right burner. The other thing I need to be watchful for is my chicken timer going off shortly. I think once it starts beeping that it's going to get close, I'm going to shut the camera off so you guys don't hear that timer going off. Let's see. In the meantime, I've got another mixing bowl ready to go. And actually, I'm looking at the timer on the oven right now, and that looks to be getting close. I'm also looking at the yeast mixture, and that is definitely puffing up. I've got that in the background as well, and yeah, now I see the butter mixture starting to melt on me here, so that's exactly where I want to be with the butter mixture. So I'm just waiting for the oven to chime that it's got, the oven to beep that it's got 1 minute left on the chicken. And then at that point, like I said, I'm going to shut the camera off. And we will come back when we're ready for the next step. Now we've got another mixing bowl in shot. So now I'm going to take the butter and milk mixture and pour it in here. Grab my spatula, grab one of my spatulas so I can scrape as much of this out as I can. Okay. Now we're going to grab the egg and the egg yolk. So I got the egg right here. Pardon the racket of the packaging separating for me. There's the egg. We'll get some paper towel so I can deal with the egg white that came out. And we'll grab the egg yolk. The egg white can get poured off. And then the eggs can go back into the fridge. I'll whisk this together. Okay. I think we're all good there. And then I'm going to bring another bigger bowl in shot. In another mixing bowl, which I'm going to use one of my big ones, here we want to whisk together the flour, sugar, and salt. That's the sugar, so we'll grab that first. We need 1/3 cup of sugar. I think I was expecting that to be the flour. But I forget I've got the flour in a bigger canister. Namely, this size canister. And I've got my 1/2 cup out here since I can use that and count to 5 and get the same result. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Some of these were heaping 1/2 cups, but that's probably fine. And then we need the 1/3 teaspoon of salt, which I've got my salt right here. 1/3 or 1/2 teaspoon? 1/2 teaspoon. So I had the right measuring spoon out, I just announced the wrong size. Okay, the salt can stay out since I'll be using that later for something else. So we're going to whisk all of that together. Okay. Actually, I just had a thought for the next step that's coming up, so I'm going to be right back while I look something up. So a certain somebody behind the camera finally decided to have a rush of brains to his head and go, wait a second, I bet my stand mixer could do this. A short message to ChatGPT later, and the stand mixer is right here in shot along with the bowl for the stand mixer. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add the yeast mixture and the yeast and milk mixtures to the flour mixtures, and then we're going to use a wooden spoon to combine them so my whisk can actually get out of shot. So here's the yeast mixture coming in. I'll actually go get the spatula I've been using for that. And then we'll get the milk and butter mixture. We'll bring that in as well. Also using that spatula to scrape the sides down. Okay. Then we'll mix it with a wooden spoon to combine everything together. grab another spatula so I can scrape out the flour. Okay. And it just says to combine. I don't think there's a... I don't think there's a threshold here. Okay, so now that that's all ready to go, now we're going to knead this either in the bowl or on a lightly dusted work surface until smooth and elastic. I'm going to use the stand mixer I'm going to use my stand mixer once I get this locked in place. There we are, with the dough hook attachment. Lock that down, and we'll knead that for 10 to 15 minutes until it's smooth and elastic. So I'm going to set a timer here for 15 minutes. I've got that locked down. I'll start that on low. And then we will come back in about 15 minutes. I'm also going to stop on occasion to scrape down the sides just to make sure everything gets incorporated. But we'll come back to that when the stand mixer is done. The next thing we're going to do, now that we've had time for the dough to knead, is we're actually going to oil up another bowl. I'm just going to pour some olive oil in here. Then we're going to use a paper towel to spread it around. Without sending the bowl itself flying. That's probably too much oil, but it's what we're going to go with. I'm going to bring the paper towel over to the garbage, not the garbage to the paper towel. Then I'm going to dip my hands in there, in the dishwater. And now I'm going to turn the dough into the oiled bowl that I just put together. Once it decides it wants to scrape out of here. Jeez Louise. It is not wanting to separate from the pan. Okay, there, from the bowl. There, we're getting it. Okay. There we go. Okay. I think that's the best we're going to do on that. So now we want to turn the dough to make sure it gets coated in the oil. There we are. Perfect. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to take some plastic wrap and we're going to cover the dough. We're going to take some plastic wrap, which I've got right here. We're going to cover the dough. Plastic wrap has always been notoriously finicky for as long as I can remember, but I think we can get it covered by running a piece like that, and then another one across the long edge, or across the other edge. About like so. Then we're going to set that aside to rise until we're going to set that aside to rise until it's doubled in volume, which should take about 2 hours. So I'm going to bring this back over to the table and we'll let that rise for about 2 hours. So by the power of editing, it's going to seem like a moment later, but in reality it'll be about 2 hours later when we come back to this. As you can see, I've got a baking sheet in shot for this next step. So what we're going to do now is we're going to grease and flour a baking sheet. So I've got more of the butter back here that I'm going to use. So we'll go ahead and use this to grease the baking sheet. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna get another piece of aluminum foil. Something that's actually going to sit over the pan and hopefully won't go sprawling. So let me find the aluminum foil, which is back over here. I'm probably just going to end up greasing the sheet directly, but I like using aluminum foil because it makes the cleanup a lot easier. So hopefully this time it'll hold in place when I go to grease the baking sheet. Might also help if I grease all going in the same direction. But I do want to try to get as many of these nooks and crannies as I can. So, yeah. It's puffing up a little bit, but it's not bad. Okay. All right, that is greased. Perfect. We can throw that stick of butter away, and now we're going to put some flour down on it. I'm going to break up some of this clump. Spread the flour around as best I can. Okay. There we are. So, on that note, I'm going to give my hands a quick wash. Because I'm going to turn the camera off at this point, and then we're going to come back to a floured work surface. No bonus points for guessing what we're going to be doing with our floured work surface. We're going to take our dough and turn it onto said floured work surface. About like that. I'll wash my hands again. Because now what we're going to do is they say to cut it in half, then each half into half again to form quarters, and each quarter into halves again to form 8 pieces of dough. I'm going to simplify all of that and say, cut this into 8 pieces. So the question is, which knife do I want? And I think I want this one. So we're going to go about like so. There we are. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8. There we are. Now we're going to roll each piece. They suggest a 4-inch rope and tie it into a knot, tucking one end in the other, under the other. If you prefer, and we're going to do it this way, we're simply going to roll all of these into balls. Because I don't have the patience to bother with the rolling it into a rope and then tying it off. So we're just going to roll these into balls instead. Because I figure that'll be a lot easier of a thing to do than bothering with tying it into ropes. So we're going to place them on the baking sheet. You might have to compress them down a little bit as well as if you're making snowballs, just to get them to stick together. Anyway, I'm going to do that with the other 6, and then we're going to set these aside for another 2 to 3 hours to rise. And we're waiting for them to double in volume. So once again, we'll come back to this in about 2 to 3 hours. We're over here at the table because I've got some stuff I'm getting ready at the counter and at the stove to make dinner tonight. So here are the rolls as they've been rising for the last few hours. I just finished preheating the oven to 350, so I'm going to throw them in for, it's ultimately going to be 20 minutes. So I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes and I want to rotate them halfway through the baking time. So I'm going to put the rolls in the oven and we'll come back to this in about 20 minutes. Here's our first look at the hot rolls as they're fresh coming out. Well, not fresh coming out of the oven. I was working on dinner tonight, so I had some time to cool. But I am going to cut one of these up, put some grape jelly on it, and I'll meet you guys over in my desk for the taste test. I've got one of the hot rolls right here. I put some, you might have seen the Concord grape jelly in the ingredient shot earlier. That's what I've got these covered in. So, let's give this a taste and see what I think. All in all, I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. There is a warning in the recipe, though, that they will get dense after a few hours, so they probably won't keep well as leftovers. I'll have to keep that in mind. Anyway, that is another episode of Mystical Munchies in the books. Next week will be an afternoon upload, most likely, as we will be making the entree Paddington burgers. As for what else is coming up on the channel, later tonight I will be streaming another wrestling stress test as we play Face to the Mat Pro Wrestling by Play Games. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be playing Ostkrieg by Compass Games as we head back to the Eastern Front of World War II Europe. Wednesday, we're playing G.I. Joe, the deck building game. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care, everyone.